"Your sister is more deserving, you should stay home," my father said when I surprised him with a luxury trip to Greece for his retirement. So I smiled, agreed, and made sure their dream getaway became the most mortifying nightmare they'd never forget. I never thought my father handing away my dream gift would feel like a physical blow. But in that moment, standing in our living room, my entire world shifted, and I knew I was about to change it right back. The air in the room was thick with expectation, the kind that makes you hold your breath. My father, David, had just announced his retirement, and the living room of our family home in Pennsylvania was packed with friends and family. I'd just revealed the surprise of a lifetime. "You see, I'm Chloe, and I'm 33. My younger sister, Sarah, is 27. We grew up in a typical suburban household with our parents, David and Linda. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class family. But inside those walls, there was a clear hierarchy, and I was never at the top. Sarah was the golden child. She had bright blonde hair, sparkling blue eyes, and this effortless charm that drew everyone in. I had mousy brown hair, glasses for years, and a personality my mother often called too serious. Sarah sailed through school, getting straight A's without trying. I studied until midnight and barely scraped by with B's. She made the cheerleading squad, I spent lunch in the library. The favoritism wasn't subtle. Sarah wanted piano lessons, Dad bought a baby grand. I asked for art classes, Mom said we couldn't afford unnecessary expenses. Sarah got a brand new car for her 16th birthday. I got a used bike and was told to be grateful. College solidified everything. Sarah got into a state university, and my parents pay for absolutely everything: tuition, housing, meal plans, even spending money. She joined a sorority, went on spring break, and posted endless photos of her perfect college life. I got into a better school 2 hours away, but Dad sat me down, explaining they'd maxed out their budget on Sarah. If I wanted to go, I had to figure it out myself. So I did. I worked 2 jobs, took out loans, and graduated with $30,000 in debt. Sarah graduated debt-free, then moved back home. I moved to Boston, working 80-hour weeks at a consulting firm. 12 years passed. I climbed the corporate ladder, paid off my loans, and built a comfortable life. Sarah bounced between retail jobs, still living with our parents. She never kept a position for more than 18 months, always finding fault with management, hours, or customers. Mom and Dad always supported her, making excuses about her sensitive soul. When Dad announced his retirement last January, I wanted to do something special for him. Despite everything, he was still my father. I'd spent years in therapy processing my childhood, and my therapist encouraged finding closure through positive actions. So, I planned an incredible retirement trip. Dad had always talked about Portugal ever since his college roommate went decades ago. He kept a photo of Porto on his office wall forever. I planned an all-expenses-paid, 2-week luxury vacation, flights, 5-star hotels, private tours, the works. It cost nearly $22,000, but I could afford it, and I genuinely wanted to give him this experience. I flew home to Pennsylvania in March for his retirement party. After the cake, I stood up and announced my surprise. I had a custom presentation on my laptop, with photos of the hotels, the itinerary. I connected it to their TV and hit play. The room fell silent as images of whitewashed villages and crystal blue waters filled the screen. I explained the trip: business class to Lisbon, 3 days exploring ancient ruins, then a cruise through the islands with stops in Lagos and Porto. Every detail was arranged. All they needed to do was pack. Dad's face lit up. For maybe 5 seconds, he looked at me with genuine pride. Then his eyes shifted to Sarah, who stood in the corner, arms crossed, and his expression changed. "Chloe, this is incredibly generous," he began, and my heart swelled. Then came the hammer. "But I need to think about what's fair. Your sister has been going through a tough time. She just lost her job, and she could really use a vacation to recharge. You understand, right? You've had so many opportunities to travel with your career. Sarah deserves this more than I do." The room stayed quiet. Everyone watched me, waiting. "I planned this for you, Dad," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "And I appreciate it, sweetie, I really do," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "But family means making sacrifices. Sarah needs this trip more than I do right now. You're strong enough to understand that." Mom chimed in from across the room, "Chloe, don't be selfish. Your sister has been really depressed lately. This could help turn things around for her." Sarah just looked at me with this expectant expression, like it was obvious I'd just hand over the trip I'd spent months planning and thousands of dollars funding. Something inside me snapped. But instead of exploding, a cold, calculated calm settled over me. Years of being second place, of watching my achievements dismissed while Sarah's mediocrity was celebrated, my feelings invalidated, my sacrifices taken for granted. It all crystallized into perfect clarity. I smiled. "You know what? You're absolutely right. Sarah should go." Dad's face relaxed with relief. "I knew you'd understand." "Of course," I continued, pulling out my phone. "Let me just contact the travel agency and change the booking to Sarah's name. This is going to be such an amazing experience for you, Sarah." Sarah perked up immediately. "Really? Oh my God, Chloe. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I need right now." Mom hugged Sarah while Dad squeezed my shoulder again, clearly proud of me for doing the right thing. I stepped into the kitchen and made a call, speaking loud enough for them to hear me confirm the name change. What they didn't know was I wasn't calling a travel agency. I was calling my friend Kevin, asking him to play along while I pretended to transfer the booking. The next 2 months were busy. I told my family I was swamped with work, which was partially true, but I was also orchestrating something else entirely. See, I booked everything directly. No travel agency middleman, which meant I had complete control over every reservation. Hotels, tours, cruise, restaurants, all in my name with confirmation numbers I could modify at will. Sarah left for Portugal in mid-May, posting constant updates on social media. Photos at the airport with captions about manifestation, selfies on the plane with champagne. She'd invited her friend Ashley to join her on my dime, of course, and they documented every moment. Between the retirement party in March and Sarah's departure in May, I had plenty of time to sit with my decision. Some nights, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if I was becoming the villain in my own story. My conscience would whisper that maybe I should just let it go, be the bigger person, move on. But then I'd remember specific moments from my childhood I'd buried deep. I remembered being 14 and winning a regional art competition. My drawing was selected from hundreds of entries for display at the state capitol. I was so proud, telling my parents at dinner. Dad nodded, "That's nice, honey," before turning to Sarah to ask about her upcoming cheerleading performance. Mom hung my award certificate on the refrigerator, but it was covered by Sarah's honor roll report card within a week. I remembered my college graduation. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, juggling 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.7 GPA. I'd done it without any financial help from them, and I was the first person in our extended family to graduate with honors. The ceremony was on a Saturday, 3 hours from home. I sent them the invitation months in advance. The day before, Mom called to say they couldn't make it because Sarah had a really important job interview at a clothing store that same weekend. They needed to be there for moral support. I walked across that stage alone, while my roommate's family cheered for me out of pity. I remembered last Thanksgiving, just 5 months before the retirement party. I'd flown home for 4 days, my first visit in 8 months because work had been brutal. I brought expensive wine, gifts for everyone, and offered to cook the entire meal. On Thanksgiving morning, Sarah announced she'd invited her new boyfriend, Jason, and his parents. Suddenly, the focus shifted entirely to impressing Jason's family. Mom spent the whole day coaching Sarah on conversation topics and outfit changes. When Jason's mother complimented the wine I'd brought, Mom said, "Oh, Sarah picked that out. She has such sophisticated taste." I was sitting right there. Sarah didn't correct her. These memories weren't dramatic. There was no mistreatment, no screaming matches, no obvious cruelty. Just 1,000 small cuts over 3 decades. Each one showing me exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Death by 1,000 paper cuts is still death. So during those 2 months of preparation, whenever doubt crept in, I'd pull up one of these memories and let it fuel my resolve. I wasn't being petty or vindictive. I was creating a teaching moment. My parents and sister needed to understand that their actions carried weight, that taking someone for granted eventually leads to consequences. I'd also spent time documenting everything for a folder I'd eventually present to them. I created spreadsheets tracking financial disparities. I went through old photo albums and counted how many pictures featured Sarah versus me. The ratio was roughly 4-1. I gathered birthday cards and calculated average money enclosed. Sarah averaged about $200 per birthday from our parents. I averaged $75. I even went back through old emails and text messages. There was a thread from 2 years ago where I told Mom about a major promotion, a career breakthrough I'd worked 5 years to achieve. Her response was 3 words: "That's wonderful, sweetie." The next email in the thread, sent the same day, was about Sarah getting hired at a bakery for $12 an hour. Mom's response was a full paragraph expressing how proud she was, how this was clearly Sarah's calling, how she always knew Sarah would find her path. The documentation process was cathartic in a way I hadn't expected. Seeing it all laid out objectively in numbers and screenshots validated feelings I'd been told for years were just my imagination. "You're too sensitive," they'd say. "You're reading into things." But the data doesn't lie. The pattern was undeniable. I also reached out to some extended family members, testing the waters to see if I was crazy or if others had noticed the favoritism. My Aunt Denise, Dad's younger sister, met me for coffee in Boston one April when she was passing through for a conference. I hadn't planned to say anything, but after our second cappuccino, it all came spilling out. "I've watched it for years," Denise said quietly, stirring her drink. "I've wanted to say something so many times, but it's not my place to parent your parents. You know, David has always been that way. He gravitates toward people who need him. Sarah she's stuck, and I think that makes him feel important, like he's rescuing her. You're independent and successful, which should make him proud, but instead, I think it makes him feel unnecessary." "So, I'm being punished for being capable?" I asked. Denise reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're not being punished, honey. You're being taken for granted, and that might be worse." That conversation solidified everything for me. I wasn't imagining the favoritism. It was real. It was observable, and it had been going on so long that even extended family had noticed and felt uncomfortable. I also started seeing my therapist, Dr. Reed, twice a week instead of once during those 2 months. Dr. Reed never told me what to do about the Portugal situation. She wasn't that kind of therapist. But she helped me process my feelings. "What would closure look like for you?" she asked during one session. "I don't know," I admitted. "An apology, acknowledgement, some sign that they see me as equally important." "And if you don't get those things?" That's when I realized I'd been waiting my whole life for my parents to change, to suddenly wake up and realize they'd been treating me unfairly. But people don't change unless they're forced to confront their behavior. They don't learn unless there are consequences. And I'd never given them consequences before. I just absorbed the hurt and moved on. The Portugal trip wasn't about hurting Sarah or my parents. It was about making them feel a fraction of what I'd felt for 3 decades. It was about showing them that words have meaning, that actions have weight, that you can't just take something from someone and expect them to smile and accept it. What Sarah didn't know was I'd made some adjustments to her itinerary. First, the hotel in Lisbon. I'd originally booked a 5-star property near the castle with a rooftop pool and a Michelin-starred restaurant. 2 weeks before her departure, I contacted the hotel and downgraded the reservation to their most basic room, the one they typically reserve for last-minute bookings. It was technically still at the same property, just in the basement level, no windows, a twin bed instead of a king, and a bathroom that hadn't been renovated since the 90s. The hotel refunded me the difference, about $800, which I kept. I also removed all the amenities I'd added: no spa package, no welcome champagne, no upgraded breakfast. The private tours I'd arranged? I called each company and explained there had been a miscommunication. Instead of the intimate, expert-led experiences I'd planned, I rebooked Sarah and Ashley into the largest, most impersonal group tours available. The kind where you're herded onto a bus with 50 other tourists, given a rushed overview, and deposited at overpriced gift shops. The cruise was where things got really interesting. I'd originally booked a luxury cabin with a balcony and access to exclusive areas of the ship. I contacted the cruise line and downgraded Sarah's reservation to an interior cabin on the lowest passenger deck, positioned near the mechanical spaces where the constant hum of generators and vibration from the ship systems would make sleep nearly impossible. I also cancelled all the shore excursions I'd prepaid, leaving Sarah to figure out activities on her own at each port. The cruise line refunded me over $3,000 for the downgrade and cancellations. For restaurants, I'd made reservations at some of the best establishments in Lisbon and Porto. I called every single one and cancelled, making sure to do it just outside their cancellation policy windows so Sarah would either have to pay hefty fees to rebook or find alternatives. But the piece de resistance was the documentation. See, I kept every email, every confirmation, every receipt showing exactly what I had originally booked and paid for. I created a beautiful bound folder with a complete original itinerary, including photos of the suites, descriptions of the tours, and details of all the experiences Sarah was supposed to have, versus what she actually got. Sarah's social media posts started to change around day 3. The captions became less enthusiastic. Lisbon hotel smaller than expected, but the city is beautiful. Then, tour buses are so crowded, lol, but seeing amazing things. By the time she got on the cruise, okay, whoever said cruise ships are relaxing has never stayed in a basement room that sounds like a construction site. She called mom crying from Lagos. Apparently, when she tried to book a boat tour to the famous grottos that I'd originally arranged, she was quoted €300 per person. The restaurant she tried to visit had no record of reservations. The spa day she'd been expecting in Porto never existed on her itinerary. The phone calls from Portugal became more frequent and more desperate. Sarah called Dad at one point, hysterical, because she and Ashley had arrived at what was supposed to be a wine-tasting experience at a boutique vineyard in Porto, something I'd booked and prepaid 6 months in advance. When they showed up, the owner had no record of their reservation. I'd cancelled it weeks earlier and, knowing Sarah would have the original confirmation email I'd forwarded her, I'd used a basic photo editing app to create a fake updated confirmation with a different date, one that had already passed. When Sarah showed the owner her phone, he explained that the reservation she was showing him was for the previous week. She'd missed her appointment. The vineyard owner apparently felt bad for them and offered a standard tasting for €50 each. Nothing compared to the private sunset experience I'd originally arranged, complete with a personal sommelier and a 5-course meal overlooking the vineyards. Sarah paid it, adding to her mounting credit card debt. There was also the incident at the hotel in Porto. I'd originally booked them a historic suite, one of those iconic rooms with intricate tile work and an infinity pool overlooking the Douro River. The kind of place that costs $800 a night and books up a year in advance. I had secured it through a travel agent contact and had been so excited to give Dad this experience. But after the retirement party, after Dad handed my gift to Sarah like it was nothing, I called that hotel back. I explained I needed to modify the reservation and downgrade to a standard room. Instead of the historic suite, I booked them into a standard room in the newer, cheaper section of the property. Technically still the same hotel, so I wasn't lying. But it was a room that faced the parking lot, had no pool, and required a 15-minute uphill walk to reach the main hotel amenities. The hotel refunded me nearly $2,000 for the downgrade. Ashley posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story showing their parking lot view with the caption, "When expectations don't meet reality, LOL." I screenshotted it for my records. The cruise portion was perhaps where Sarah's experience diverged most dramatically from what I planned. My original booking had included a suite with a private balcony, complimentary specialty dining, unlimited drink packages, and prepaid shore excursions at every port. The kind of cabin where the butler brings you champagne and strawberries while you watch the sunset from your personal hot tub. The cabin Sarah actually got, the interior room near the mechanical spaces, was about 80 square feet. No windows, no natural light, just a small room with a double bed, a tiny bathroom, and the constant hum of generators and vibration from the ship's systems running 24 hours a day. The noise was so bad that Sarah texted me directly, something she rarely did, asking if I'd known about the room situation. I responded with confused emojis and said I'd specifically requested an ocean view cabin. The travel agent must have made a mistake, I wrote. Did you check with guest services? Of course, she checked with guest services. And guest services showed her exactly what was booked, an interior guarantee cabin, the cheapest option available. No specialty dining, no drink package, no shore excursions. When Sarah tried to add these things, she was quoted prices that made her eyes water. A specialty dinner for two? $150 plus gratuity. A shore excursion in Lagos? €200 per person. She put it all on her credit card. Every meal not included in the basic dining package, every drink not water or basic coffee, every attempt to salvage the experience she thought she was entitled to. I estimate she spent about $3,500 trying to upgrade what I downgraded. But here's what really got to her: other passengers. See, when you're in a suite on a cruise ship, you're in a different tier. You get priority boarding, access to exclusive lounges, better service. People treat you differently. Sarah had seen the promotional materials I'd included in my original presentation. She told all her friends she was going on a luxury cruise. She posted pre-trip content about living her best life and embracing abundance. Then she got on the ship and realized she was in steerage. Every time she walked past the suite sections with their private pool areas and concierge services, every time she stood in the buffet line while suite guests were escorted to exclusive restaurants, she was reminded that this wasn't the trip I'd actually planned. This was the trip she'd taken from me. Mom called me furious. Chloe, Sarah says the trip is nothing like what you described. She says it's been a disaster. Really? I replied, innocently. That's so strange. Let me look into it. I did not look into it. Instead, I went about my life in Boston, working, seeing friends, going to yoga classes. I felt lighter than I had in years. Every frustrated text from Sarah, every confused call from Mom, every moment they spent trying to figure out what went wrong, it was validation. They were finally experiencing a fraction of the disappointment I'd felt my entire life. My friend Mia asked me during brunch if I felt guilty. We were at our favorite spot in Beacon Hill, splitting French toast, and I'd just told her about Sarah's latest meltdown over a cancelled restaurant reservation. Honestly, I said, I keep waiting for the guilt to hit, but it hasn't. Is that bad? Mia thought about it, sipping her mimosa. I think you've been trained to feel guilty for having normal reactions to abnormal treatment. Your family has spent your whole life making you feel like you're asking for too much by wanting equal treatment. So now when you finally push back, you expect to feel bad about it. But Chloe, they did this. Your dad literally took your gift and gave it away. All you did was make. Sure, the gift they took wasn't as nice as what you actually planned. I'm actively sabotaging my sister's vacation, I pointed out. Your sister who willingly accepted a gift that was meant for your father, knowing how much work you put into it? Your sister who has never once stood up for you or acknowledged the favoritism? Your sister who is 28 years old and has been living off your parents while you've been entirely self-sufficient since college? Mia raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I'm not losing sleep over Sarah having to stay in a room without a view. By the time Sarah returned home, she was exhausted, sunburned, and had spent an additional $3,000 trying to salvage the vacation. She put it all on a credit card she couldn't afford to pay off. 2 days after she got back, I drove home to Pennsylvania. I asked my parents and Sarah to sit down in the living room because I had something to show them. I brought out the folder. "So, I heard the Portugal trip didn't go as planned," I started, setting the folder on the coffee table. "I wanted to show you what I actually booked versus what Sarah experienced." I opened the folder and began going through it page by page. The luxury suite versus the basement room. The private tours versus the cattle call group experiences. The balcony cabin versus the engine room. Every single downgrade laid out in meticulous detail. Dad's face went pale. "Chloe, what is this?" "This," I said, "is what happens when you tell someone their gift isn't good enough for you. When you decide that one daughter deserves something more than the other without even considering the thought and effort that went into it." Sarah's voice was shrill. "You sabotaged my vacation. Are you insane?" "I didn't sabotage it," I corrected. "I redirected it. You see, I spent $15,000 on a retirement trip for Dad. A trip he decided to give away because you needed it more. But here's the thing. You didn't need a luxury vacation. You needed to understand what it feels like to have your expectations raised and then crushed. You needed to know what it's like to get the lesser version of something because someone decided you weren't worth the premium option." Mom stood up. "This is cruel, Chloe. You deliberately ruined your sister's trip out of spite." "No, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I gave Sarah exactly what she's earned in life. The baseline version. The minimum viable product. Meanwhile, I've spent my entire adult life working my ass off, paying my own way, and getting told I should be grateful for scraps while Sarah coasted on your support and got everything handed to her." I flipped to the financial section of the folder. "Do you want to know what else is in here? A complete breakdown of every dollar you've spent on Sarah versus what you spent on me over the past 14 years. I started tracking this about 8 months ago, going through old bank statements, emails, and records. Sarah's college? $62,000. Mine? $0. Sarah's car? $15,000. Mine? $200 for a used bike. Sarah's rent, food, phone bills, car insurance, and other living expenses while she figured things out? Approximately $72,000 over the past 6 years. My support during that same period? $0. The numbers were brutal in their stark reality. I'd tracked everything I could remember and verify, and the disparity was stunning. "That's different," Dad said weakly. "Sarah needed more help." "No, Dad. Sarah got more help because you decided she was worth it. Every achievement I earned got minimized. Every struggle I faced alone. And when I finally tried to do something generous, something to bridge the gap and show that I still loved you despite everything, you couldn't even let me have that. You couldn't let me be the daughter who gave you something special without making it about Sarah." Tears were running down my face now, but my voice stayed steady. "So, yes, I redirected the trip. I made sure Sarah experienced a fraction of what I originally planned because I wanted all of you to understand that gifts mean something, that effort means something, that I mean something." The room was silent, except for Sarah sniveling. She'd started crying too, but I couldn't tell if it was from guilt or just anger at being called out. "I think you should leave," Mom finally said, her voice cold. "I think you're right," I agreed, standing up. I left the folder on the table. "That's your copy, by the way. I have backups. I want you to look through it sometimes and think about what kind of parents you've been. What kind of family we could have been if you'd loved your daughters equally." I walked out of that house and haven't been back since. Dad called twice in the weeks after, leaving voicemails that started with, "We need to talk about your behavior," and ended with, "You owe your sister an apology." I deleted them both. I also quietly deposited the refund money I'd received from all the downgrades, roughly $6,000, into a savings account. That money felt like compensation for years of being overlooked. Sarah sent a long text calling me a psychopath and saying she hopes I'm happy with myself. I didn't respond. Mom sent a Facebook message saying I'm no longer welcome at family gatherings until I apologized and reimbursed Sarah for the money she spent trying to fix the trip. I blocked her. The thing is, I don't feel guilty. Maybe I should, but I don't. For 32 years, I've been the daughter who wasn't quite enough, who had to prove her worth over and over while Sarah simply existed and got praised for it. I've been told to be understanding, to be generous, to be the bigger person, and I tried. I really did try with that Portugal trip. But when Dad looked at my gift, something I'd saved for, planned meticulously, and offered with genuine love, and decided it would be better given to Sarah, something in me broke. Or maybe it finally healed. Maybe I finally understood that I didn't owe them anything anymore. My therapist, Dr. Reed, asked me in our last session if I felt closure. Honestly, I do. Not because of the revenge itself, but because I finally stood up and said no more. I finally put a price tag on my self-respect, and it turned out to be worth more than $15,000 in a family that never valued me anyway. Some people in my life think I went too far. My best friend, Mia, says she understands why I did it, but worries about me burning bridges permanently. My colleague, Ryan, thinks it's the most justified revenge he's ever heard of and wants to buy me a drink to celebrate. My Aunt Denise, Dad's sister, called me 2 weeks ago to say she always knew her brother played favorites and she's proud of me for standing up for myself, even if my methods were unconventional. I'm sure if my family tells this story, I'm the villain. I'm the daughter who went nuclear over a simple request, who couldn't be the bigger person, who destroyed a vacation out of petty jealousy. And maybe from their perspective, that's true. Perspective is everything. But from where I stand, I'm the daughter who finally stopped accepting less than she deserved. The daughter who stopped making excuses for parents who should have loved their children equally. The daughter who decided that being family doesn't give you a free pass to treat someone like they're secondary forever. Did Sarah deserve to have her vacation ruined? Maybe not entirely. But did she deserve to learn that actions have consequences? That taking something from someone else has a cost? That being the favorite doesn't shield you from reality? Absolutely. Did my parents deserve to have their favoritism laid out in spreadsheet form and confronted directly? Without question. The Portugal trip they could have had, the one I actually planned, would have been extraordinary. They would have seen ancient wonders with expert guides, stayed in rooms with views of the castle, eaten at restaurants that require reservations months in advance. They would have cruised through the islands in comfort, watched sunsets from Porto that would have taken their breath away, and made memories worthy of Dad's 35-year career. Instead, Sarah got a mediocre package tour that she had to supplement with her own money. And my parents got a daughter who refuses to play their games anymore. I think about what might have happened if Dad had simply said, "Thank you, Chloe. This is incredibly thoughtful, and I'm honored." If he'd taken the trip I planned, maybe sent Sarah a nice gift card or helped her with her rent for a couple months. If my parents had just once chosen me without qualification or caveat. But they didn't, and that told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in this family. So, I made sure they learned the same lesson I'd learned over 32 years. When you're not valued, you learn to value yourself enough to walk away. I'm not sure if that makes me a hero or a villain in this story. Maybe I'm both. Maybe that's okay. What I do know is that I'm done being the daughter who accepts crumbs and calls it a feast. I'm done funding relationships with people who see me as an ATM or a safety net, but never as someone deserving of their first choice. If you ask me whether I regret it, I have to think hard. The truth is complicated. I regret that it came to this. I regret that my parents never loved me the way they love Sarah. I regret that I had to resort to this to feel heard. But do I regret standing up for myself? Do I regret showing them exactly what their favoritism looks like when it's turned back on them? Do I regret finally putting my own worth above their expectations? No, I don't regret that at all. They say living well is the best revenge. And maybe that's true. I have a great career, wonderful friends, and a life I've built entirely on my own terms. But sometimes revenge is also about drawing a line in the sand and saying, this far, no further. Sometimes it's about showing people who've taken you for granted that you're not a doormat. You're a person with feelings and limits and the power to enforce consequences. Sarah will pay off that credit card. Eventually, my parents will book another vacation somewhere. Somehow life will go on for them, probably with a new narrative about their difficult eldest daughter who couldn't just be happy for her sister. And I'll keep living my life in Boston, taking trips when I want to, spending my money on people who appreciate me, and building relationships with people who see my worth without needing a spreadsheet to prove it. Maybe someday they'll understand why I did what I did. Maybe they'll look through that folder and feel something other than anger, maybe regret, maybe recognition, maybe even remorse. Or maybe they won't, and they'll tell this story at family gatherings as proof of my vindictiveness. Either way, I'm free. Free from the obligation to be the understanding one, the flexible one, the one who sacrifices so Sarah can have what she wants. Free from parents who measure love in unequal portions. Free from the weight of trying to earn something I should have been given freely. That freedom is worth more than any trip to Portugal, no matter how luxury the accommodations. Given everything, do you think I was wrong to finally stand my ground?